everybody, Phantom Era here, a channel where we talk about the weird and wacky to the educational and downright preposterous. Today we're going to be talking about Operation Whitecoat, the world's most humane and happiest human experiment. Operation Whitecoat is often described as a biodefense research program that was run at Fort Detrick in Maryland and funded by the U.S. military. Its intent was to help prevent the severity of biological weapons, which were very much a threat at the time, and kind of like the Red Scare, except it wasn't communism this time. It was like people are going to die from anthrax and things like that. The theory was that if people could be effectively inoculated against certain diseases, that it would essentially render terrorist attacks using biological warfare against American citizens completely useless, or at the very least, it would severely minimize the effects. And so the study transpired from 1954 to 1973, all in hopes of achieving this goal. Now, in order to properly get defense mechanisms in play and understand the human body's reaction to certain diseases and what to look for if biological warfare took place, live subjects were needed, which in most cases would be very much a red flag. However, that was not the case with this one. So those who participated in the study were conscientious objectors, often religious individuals who I will get into later. But essentially, these people were like, I kind of want to serve the country, but I don't want to go and kill a bunch of people. I don't feel comfortable doing that. It was often due to personal health beliefs that they felt this way. And so the military was like, hey, well, we have something that you could participate in. The Whitecoat Project, it's more relaxed, it's pretty chill, keeping it on the down low. So across the 19 years that the research was performed, about 2,300 U.S. soldiers, combat medics, and conscientious objectors were part of this study, and they were readily infected with tularemia and Q fever. Many of these participants, as I said, were conscientious objectors who volunteered for the program, usually right after basic training. And many of them were actually combat medics because that was the most, non-violent role in the military. Basically, you don't shoot combat medics, and combat medics don't shoot you. It's kind of the one guaranteed mutual understanding in the military. Obviously, there are some horrible people that don't really care about that, and they'll kill you anyways. Unfortunately, that's just kind of how war is. Anyone who had enlisted as a combat medic around this time would have been shipped straight out to the Vietnam War, meaning that many chose to instead partake in the Whitecoat Project as a supposedly more humane, chill, lax environment compared to the horrors and brutality that were going on in the Vietnam War between both sides. So, despite having informed consent to participate in the project, there were definitely some underlying external reasons as to why people wanted to partake in the Whitecoat Project instead of the Vietnam War, and frankly, I don't really blame them. Now, with a sizable group of participants, the experiment began with its sights set on identifying dose responses for the selected biological agents. In other words, the experiment sought to document how the human body reacted to specific dosages and samples of an agent, and then this could determine the less and more extreme side effects of a particular disease. Now, in some cases, the desired bioweapon was dispersed via aerosol, and then from there, those who were infected were left to develop symptoms for about 3 days before antibiotics were distributed. And in many instances, those who were infected were kept in isolation and monitored for a few weeks or even months, just chalking up their symptoms, trying to figure out, well, how does so-and-so react? How does this person react? And things like that. Now, while this was going on, other volunteers were given experimental vaccines for things like Q fever, yellow fever, Rift Valley fever, and more. And in all, participants in Operation Whitecoat are said to have participated in about 153 research projects regarding Q fever and additional diseases, which is pretty impressive. And thanks to their service, many of the participants who weren't conscientious objectors, who were still soldiers and actively fighting in the war, were actually given up to 2 weeks of leave for participating in the experiment, which I think is pretty cool. Now, like the combat medics I mentioned earlier, this was an ideal situation for a lot of soldiers. And they were like, hey, we'll sign up for this. We'll just get infected with a little virus. We'll get cured, and then we can go home for 2 weeks and not die or blow up in the, Vietnam War. Can't say, again, that I don't blame them. Unfortunately, as the war worsened, they kind of ran out of soldiers that they could use for this, so they had to turn to another subgroup of people, which happened to be people from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which I will get into a little bit later. Now, interestingly, because it was such a win-win all around for basically anybody that participated in this project, most people that were approached, like 80% of them agreed to participate in the project, which is actually pretty incredible, because I feel like if the project itself was this really horribly designed abusive experiment, most people would have been like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. But what's really interesting about the Whitecoat project is that basically everything that was going on was disclosed. The public knew about it, they knew what was going on. It was very upfront and forward and not secretive, like, at all, which is insane. There was a brief stint in time where the government and some other agencies were accusing those who were leading the Whitecoat project as, being secretive and, like, destroying the American population, and we were actually just creating biological weapons to use on our citizens as well as, like, the enemy in Vietnam, and that it's unethical, and, well, research hasn't been published. And those who were running the Whitecoat project came forward and basically said, yeah, research hasn't been published yet because it's not finished. Like, we have to write it up, we have to publish it, it's got to be peer reviewed. And eventually, like, all of the research did come out. There's a very small portion of it that's still classified, but for the most part, a lot of it was declassified. So in total, this program really ushered in, like, new health benefits across the board. First of all, the vaccines that were tested helped lead to proper vaccines being made, and so those are now in effect across the globe and things like that for some of the diseases that I mentioned earlier. And then the Whitecoat project also, like, developed a crap ton of safety equipment, such as hooded safety cabinets, decontamination procedures, incubators, and more. So, like, the whole daunting, potentially unethical issues with the program, like, it accomplished its goals. It very much, helped advance what we know about healthcare and what we know about certain diseases, and it really made some serious advances that are, like, still particularly helpful in today's day and age. It studied the human body. It made vaccines to protect the human body from particular diseases and agents, and, like I said, it advanced technology for, future biodefense research and things like that. So to me, I'd say this experiment was a pretty big success. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's about as good as you could get with something like this. Now, before I wrap things up, I do want to say that a majority of the people who participated in the experiment itself were Seventh-day Adventist church members, because, like I mentioned earlier, once they kind of ran out of soldiers that they could, like, throw at this experiment or who wanted to participate in it, they needed new people. And at this time, basically everybody in the Seventh-day Adventist Church were great objectors to, like, the war. Not in the sense that they were anti-war, Vietnam War. It was that a lot of them were supposed to be drafted into this, conflict, and they were like, well, we don't want to kill anybody, but we still want to serve our country. Like, we still want to help, we just don't want to shoot people. And so those who were leading the Whitecoat project were like, oh, well, these guys are great. Like, let's have them do the experiment. And so this was a very easy way for them to fulfill their duty in the draft. And one man named William Twombly, a Seventh-day Adventist church member, puts it like this, and I'm going to read a quote here. We didn't want to bear arms and kill people, but we wanted to serve our country. That comes from the Bible. Thou shalt not kill, and that's the basic root of it. And overall, there hadn't really been any formally documented concerns in regard to lingering health problems for anybody that really participated in this. Some participants have mentioned on occasion that they feel their health was permanently impacted from the experiments. However, those comments haven't really been vetted or proven, or there hasn't really been any actual documentation. They've just been kind of like off the record, offhanded remarks. So it's hard to say whether or not there's any substance there. What's surprising to me is that the founder of the Whitecoat Foundation and first person to actually be infected in the project, Ken Jones, remained healthy and worry-free, and to him, the benefits of the experiment very much outweighed the dangers of the experiment itself. He was all about helping humanity and advancing healthcare and medical practices. And in the grand scheme of things, the experiment is perhaps, as far as I'm concerned, like the most ethical human experiment that I've ever read of. Consent was completely informed. Individuals were treated for their symptoms. They weren't just left to fend off these illnesses on their own. And by most accounts, the experiment furthered medical research as a whole, and the participants, before fully going on board and committing to the experiment and like signing documentation that they were going to participate. They were allowed to talk to pastors, preachers, family members, other medical experts. Like, they were allowed to ask around so that they knew exactly what it was that they were getting into, which in many experiments is not allowed and is not the case. And so I really commend the people of the Whitecoat Project for allowing that to happen. I mean, overall, the people that ran this project, who ran Operation Whitecoat, like, they very much cared about the participants who were, being infected with these diseases, and they were like, hey, we're going to do the best that we can to help you, and in turn you're going to help us. Like, it was a very respectful environment, and there's actually a lot of different reunions that have happened between members of the project and operation itself. And people who have been infected have met up over the years. They made a lot of really strong bonds with each other. It was a very cordial environment, very tight knit, community of people who had gone through all of this. And so, the fact that they're still meeting up years later and talking to each other and having a good time and catching up and saying, hey, what's going on in your life, to me, like, it really warms my heart. I think that's really adorable. And so, this, in my opinion, like, this experiment was so humane that I can't really, like, pick it apart the way that I did with Operation Sea Spray and say, well, that was just stupid. Like, you're not supposed to do that to your own American people. This one was actually handled with care. Granted, you can't really do experiments like this anymore because of, like, legal considerations, different certifications, ethical considerations, and there's different, like, governing boards for research that you have to get, your experiments approved by. And so, yeah, probably couldn't get away with doing something like this in today's day and age, but at the time, like, I'd say it was a pretty good experiment. Like, I'm not even gonna lie, they did a really good job. Frankly, if more experiments back in the day were as ethical as the Whitecoat, like Operation Whitecoat, we probably wouldn't be as apprehensive about certain human experiments. Unfortunately, one good seed in a pile of rotten, like, apples isn't gonna do much. So I understand why we have a lot of the protections that we do in place nowadays. But like I said, like, this is like a top tier human experiment. It feels so weird to say that. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. It feels really weird to be like, yeah, this was a fantastic human experiment. But it really was. It genuinely was. And I actually read a 39-page document on this, which I will leave the link down in the description, because it really goes into more depth on how the Seventh-day Adventist Church has actually helped experiments like this for years. Like, they've been a very big proponent of trying to, assist when they can in the military without actually seeing combat. And I think they're very brave, admirable individuals. I have definitely a lot more respect now for them as a religious denomination than I did before, because I didn't really know about them. But yeah, overall, I'd say pretty good story, pretty happy story considering some of the other things that we've covered on this channel. I'm not sure if I'll do any other, like, operation videos. Maybe I'll make it a series. Let me know what you think down in the comments. But if you want more content like this, please leave a like, leave a comment, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell icon so that you know when new videos are up. It really does mean the absolute most to me. I love being able to share this stuff with you guys, and hopefully we can all be a little more educated on, like, our own history, as well as, making better decisions in the future based on the stories that I can share with you guys today. But I want to say thank you all for watching. It really does mean a lot, and I will see all of you guys in the next video.